Okay, so here's my story. Be 16. Be black and have family down in Alabama. They farm and own a huge amount of land down in Huntsville. Uncle owns a big house and a bunch of trailers they put out in the woods for hunting or camping. Down south, cousins suggest that we go out there to camp. Know I'm a city kid from Chicago, so they tease the ever-living shit out of me. Collect food, kill a pig, and some chickens, and bring necessities to camp out for a few days. We get to camp and it's obvious something's weird. Air has this electric smell like right before a storm. We think nothing of it and unpack and go down to the little creek to swim for a few hours. All of a sudden, some older white guy and a white teenager come out of the bushes. He has a shotgun in his arm and says hello, asks us what we're doing this far back in woods. I tell him about my uncle, who he knows, and say we're out camping. He tells us we need to be real careful out here and stick together. There's a big animal in the woods. His son, who is my age, asks if he can stay and hang out with us. He says okay. Okay, I'm going to stop green texting now because the story's fairly long and the format is really hard to write in. So we ended up playing football. Dicking around with me, there's this white kid, Tanner, 5 of my cousins, and then 4 of their friends. In total, there are 5 girls and 6 boys. We were all around 15 to 17. We ended up just dicking the day away, so we head back to the camp and pulled out some stuff for a campfire, even though the trailers both had kitchenettes. Tanner says that his family's property sits up against my uncle's. He wants to run home and ask his dad if he can stay out camping with us. My cousin Rooster says he's going to go with him since it's going to get dark soon, and one of the girls also wanted to tag along. It's about 7 o'clock and it's starting to get pretty dark. They take flashlights and take the trail towards Tan's property. The rest of us just chill. We make s'mores, drink, and kiss on the girls. About 30 or 40 minutes later, there's the smell of ozone again. You can smell it over the fire that we'd started. This really nasty, coppery smell, like right after you've had a nosebleed and it stopped. It wasn't exactly like dried blood, but it was that nasty, metallic, back of your throat kind of smell. We immediately think that it's some kind of electrical malfunction or someone left a hot plate on or some shit. We searched the trailers and nothing was on, but we could all smell it. All of a sudden, we can hear people booking down the path towards us, and Rooster, Tan, and the girl all come running into the clearing out of breath. They didn't even break stride. They all ran into the trailer right by where the fire is. We all cleared the hell out of there and into the trailers. They ended up calming down, and even Rooster was crying his eyes out at this point. All the while, the fire is guttering lower and lower, so my other cousins say, screw it, and they're gonna go outside to get the generator out of a shed between the trailers. Tanner says, fuck no, lock the front door, ain't nobody else going outside. He's been crying too, and his eyes are all bloodshot and puffy, and his pants are dirty as hell. He goes on to tell us that they went up to his house. His father said that he could go out camping, but to make sure they were careful, and maybe they should take one of the hunting rifles. Evidently, Tanner had seen something in their yard a few days before. One of their pigs had come up, ripped up and half-eaten. They just assumed it was some big cat or coyote, even though they don't usually screw with the live animals. He had gone upstairs and packed his stuff, and told his dad that they would be okay without the rifle because coyotes usually avoid people, so they started walking back towards where we were camping. So Rooster finally stops crying and shaking. The girl already had, but she was just staring out the window with a dumb look on her face. He says they gotten halfway into the woods towards the camp when they started to hear shit in the forest. It was almost pitch black by this time, so they weren't sure at first what it was. The girl says that she heard something in the bushes right off the trail, and they all beamed their flashlights over there, and there was just someone standing there in the woods. Rooster said they shouted at him and told him that he was scaring the shit out of them and how big of an asshole he was. He says that's when he realized that the guy was facing away from them. So they kept walking and they started smelling that coppery smell again. They say they look off into the forest on the opposite side, and then there's another guy standing there, backwards, slightly closer to the path. So now they start power walking and Tan keeps going, should have taken the fucking rifle. As they're telling the story, the smell is still super strong, even inside the cabin. After they started walking faster, a kind of low gibbering had started coming from both sides of the woods. They started booking it back to the trailer. The girl said she had flashed her light out into the woods on either side of them and seen something jerking itself through the woods towards them. The gibbering just got louder and louder, and when they could see the light from our campfire, something had come out of the woods about 40 yards behind them on the track, and they had just flat out ran as hard as they could into the trailer. So now we're out in the woods, and we're assuming at this point it's some rednecks or some shit trying to screw with us. All of a sudden, my other cousin, Junior, starts going on about how he went to school with a native kid and was telling him about the Goatman or some shit. Promptly told him to shut up because we don't need spooky talk right now. But he just keeps going on and on about how it's the Goatman and how we're in his woods and blah blah blah. Now, at the time, I'd never heard of this Goatman or any of that, but then a couple years ago, the year before I graduated from college, I had a Native American for a roommate and ended up asking him about it. To sum it up, it's basically a man with the head of a goat, and he can shapeshift, and he gets among groups of people to terrorize them. It's also supposed to be kind of like the Wendigo, and it's bad mojo to even talk about it, and even worse if you see it. Keep in mind, I didn't know this back when I was 16, so my cousin's going, "The Goatman's going to get in and fucking get us." The girls are all terrified, and my cousins and I are all trying to figure out if it's just some hillbillies or a large animal of some kind. Then all of a sudden, the smell just goes away. Like, to this day, I haven't experienced anything like it. Usually, smells kind of fade away or lessen. It just literally was there 1 second, then not the next. So it's after an hour, making it around 9 or 10. We stopped shitting bricks enough to go back outside and stoke the fire a little. We figured it was just some guys trying to fuck with us, so we don't go back home because we think if we do, they'll chase us through the woods or something else. Nothing else weird happened. We stayed another night, and for the main part of it, nothing happened. At about 1 in the morning, we're outside getting drunk and telling ghost stories as someone is finishing some spooky story I don't remember what about. The smell comes back. It's so strong that one of the girls literally started vomiting. I stand up, and you can actually feel how clammy the air is. I said we should get inside, and this isn't right. We should have just left. We all go back inside, and we're just standing around. My cousin is still going on about how it's the Goatman. My cousin Rooster tries to shut him up, and all the while I'm just feeling that something's wrong, but I can't figure out what it is. We end up sitting in there for a while. The smell is just as strong, and we're terrified and all huddled in this camper. We ended up cooking brats for everybody because nobody wants to go outside. It's one of those packs with 4 brats. We have a total of 3 packs. Grill them up on the stove and give everybody one. I get mine, and after a while, one of the cousins gets up and goes over to the pot to get another one. He started grumbling about how I got 2 brats and everyone else only got 1. And I look at him like he's stupid. Tell him that everyone only got 1 because there are only 12 brats. If he wants more, he should open up a new pack and cook some more. That's when the girl that had been out with Rooster and Tanner just starts screaming, "Jesus, Lord, get it out!" She's crying and shivering, and then it dawns on the cousin standing up what the fuck is wrong. Me and him both glance around the room, and I felt my heart sink. I run out of the cabin, and the girl runs out with us. The trailer door is banging against the side of the cabin. One of my cousin's friends asked us what was wrong. I started counting. There's only 11 now. I shit you not, my cousin verified. There had been 12 people in the cabin. But being that everyone didn't really know each other, no one had really noticed the whole time that there was an extra person. And I realized earlier that I kind of noticed something was off. You know when you're just dicking around and having a good time, you don't sweat the smallest shit. You don't end up keeping track of certain stuff. I'm dead sure someone else had been in the trailer with us, and they'd been there for at least a day eating with us. What makes it worse is I can't figure out which one because I don't think anyone ever actually interacted with the other person. Girl kept praying to Jesus, and we're all sitting outside. Eventually, we get giant sticks and go back in the cabin, but no one's there. We count again, and there's 11 people. We go back into the trailer and lock the door. We finally explain what happened. The girl says she realized too. And that was when he was about to say something. The person sitting next to her grabbed her leg hard, leaned over to her, and said something she couldn't understand. So we were pretty much scared as hell as we huddle together, and I fall asleep. When I wake up, the sun is coming up and half the people are asleep. The other half are packing our shit up. We all want to walk back home, but like 4 people want to stay until the sun is all the way up. And some people think we're just screwing around with them and want to stay. I just want to get the fuck out of these woods already. The girl's name was Kiera, the one that Goatman had touched. Anyway, I asked her if she really thinks it was something bad, and she says she just wants to go home and doesn't want to be out in the woods alone for another night. So we decided to split up. The 4 that want to go can go, but I have to stay because I have the keys to my cabin, and it's my uncle's. I'm super pissed at this point because I feel like people aren't taking this shit seriously, and I definitely don't want to be out in the woods for another night. I spent the rest of the day trying to convince everyone else, now 4 guys and 4 girls, to get the fuck out of Dodge. Tanner leaves with them to go get a rifle, and he says he's going to be back. So there are just 7 of us left by 4 p.m. Around 5 p.m. he hasn't made it back yet, and we're getting extremely antsy. The only reason I stopped begging him to go was because he went to get a gun. It's about 5:30 or so when the one cousin that did stay says the girl Kiera is outside. We all look outside, and surely enough, she's standing by the fire pit with her back to the cabin. And I'm thinking to myself, if she was so scared, why would she come back? And then I get this nasty feeling in my gut. Keep in mind, the whole time the coppery smell has been gone. Now I realize that I can smell just a twinge of it. I told this to everyone. And these are the people that wanted to stay in the woods after we had the Goatman in our midst. They're laughing at me and asking if I set this up to scare them. I looked at them and said, I'm not fucking bullshitting you at all right now. I asked them why would I want to play like that. So one of the girls goes outside to get Kiera. She gets halfway to her and stops cold. Kiera starts heaving. I don't really know how to describe it. Sort of like if someone with their back turning was laughing without actually making any sound. It was this fact that made me realize there was not a sound in the whole woods. It was dead silent. This was like later in the September, so still fairly hot at the time, but it was super chilly some days too. You could usually hear big-ass geese honking or some kind of birds or squirrels chit-chatting. So I step out the door and tell her to come back in the trailer right now. She backs up into the trailer and we lock the door. We pull down all the shades except for one and put a guy on the chair to watch her. She stands there for another 20 minutes or so. The guy turns to us to tell us that she's still there, and then there's a huge bang on the door. So we all jump up and scramble around the living room of the trailer. Banging is super loud. So now my cousin's holding onto one of the girls, and the other 2 are kind of giggling with nervous laughter. Me and the other 2 guys are shitting bricks. Then we hear Tanner. He's screaming, "Let me the fuck in! Stop playing around!" So we go over to the door and open it, and he stumbles in with a rifle. There's no one else outside. Evidently, he had walked up to the campsite. Nothing weird happened in the forest, but he'd seen a girl. Mind you, he said, it was not Kiera standing there. When he had gotten to the edge of the clearing, she had turned towards him with a slack-jawed look and just stared him down, slowly tracking him as he walked around the outside of the clearing towards the camp. He said it wasn't until he was almost halfway to the trailer he realized that she was edging closer to him. She had started off by the fire, and without even seeing her move, she had been turning, inching closer. He said he just ran the rest of the way back to the cabin thinking it would open. When he got to the door and it was locked, he turned around and it was about half the distance to him. He looks around the room and then gets super pale, pulls me to the side and whispers in my ear, "You know there are only 7 of us in here, right?" I get that feeling where your stomach drops to your nuts. It had been back inside the trailer while we were sorting out who was going where, and then when we all went outside to talk early in their day, it just slipped right back in. We looked out the window and there's nobody out there. So we recount everyone, and then basically I go over and ask everyone how many people they thought were here earlier. Everyone says 8. I say, "Well, how many are there now?" They all do the count and realize there are only 7. So Tanner had brought back a couple boxes of ammo and his rifle, and he had told his dad that there was some kind of animal in the forest because he didn't think his dad would believe him if he said it was a Goatman. He says his cousin is supposed to be coming down in a few hours, and in the morning we can all go back to his place and his cousin will drive us home. Now I'm really terrified, but at least I feel better because we can be American and shoot the fuck out of whatever it is if it comes back. Then my cousin gets into this huge argument with one of the girls because she thinks I'm trying to be funny and prank them. She's getting really scared and I'm not funny. Keeps telling her, I'm not that kind of person. She says, well, how do we know the girl wasn't just Tanner in a wig? Or if it's really the Goatman, then how do we know this is the real Tanner and the Goatman didn't just kill Tanner in the woods and take his gun? So we got into this giant argument about this where me and Tanner are like, we could seriously be in danger because at the very least someone has been sneaking themselves into our trailer without us knowing and mingling with us. And at worst, something bad is in the forest fucking with us. One of the girls starts crying and saying she wants to go right now, and we all tell her we shouldn't because none of us are going through the woods in the middle of the night. At this point, the sun is starting to go down and it's a little cloudy out. We eat something and turn on the radio for a while, but we can't really get a station out there with anything decent, so we turn off about the time that Tan's cousin shows up. He was like 19, I think. At this point, the sun is just barely over the horizon. He has one of those heavy-duty lantern flashlights and another rifle. He walks up to the trailer and we whisper to Tanner to make sure it's his cousin. He says yes. The guy looks behind him and all around the camp, then walks in. He kind of glances at us and looks a little confused. He says, where's your other little buddy at? I figured she would meet me up at the cabin. Is she slow or something? He also asked whether we'd been cooking blood in the cabin because it smelled like blood in hot pans all the way up the trail. We're all like, no. But we ask him what the fuck he's talking about with the girl he saw. He had come down the same trail Tanner had been using, and he'd come up on one of U's guy's buddies standing in the middle of the trail, looking at him slack-jawed. He asked her a bunch of questions, but all she did was look at him. Then she smiled at him, and he just kept walking. She couldn't seem to keep up with him and kept lagging a little behind him. He asked her if she was hurt or something and if she needed any help, but she just continued to stare. Eventually he'd been walking and turned around the bend in the trail, but when he looked back, the trail was empty. He assumed she'd taken some shortcut through the woods to her trailer. We told him the whole story of what's been going on. I half expected him to say we were full of shit, but he just listened and then sat down on the couches in the living room. Tanner's cousin gets back to the girl. He says when she kept trying to lag behind him, it weirded him out, so he tried to keep her in front of him. But no matter how slow he walked, she was always a little bit behind. And then he smelled that nasty smell, and it got stronger as he got to the camp. She said something really low that he didn't catch. And when he had turned around, she was right up on him, and he stepped back from her. It was at this point he asked her if she was really okay, and if she wasn't, he would carry her on his back the rest of the way. She just kept staring. He said he reached out for her, as in to grab her on the shoulder, but he must have misjudged the distance, because she was off to the side of where he put his hand, like she moved while he was looking dead at her. So at this point we know this is real. Unless Tanner's playing a joke, but we can tell he's not, because he's almost pissing his pants at this point. So they load up their rifles and we eat some more. We just kind of sit around until about 11. To this day, every time I think about this, I just pray to God it was some huge prank my cousins were pulling, never revealed to me. At around 11, the stink of copper turns into an actually nasty, gross blood smell, like cooking blood and singed hair. Tanner and his cousin Reese get up instantly and grab the rifles. There's a half knocking, half clawing at the door, and I shit you not, there's this voice, and it sounds like when you see those YouTube dogs or cats whose owners teach them how to talk. It says in this haltly, weirdly toned voice,
"Let me in."
Made my nuts creep up against my body, and one of the girls just starts crying and calling Jesus. It was so obvious it was not a person talking. Didn't have the right cadence, and there's some shit that I never realized into this moment, but all people kind of have a certain cadence when they talk, no matter what language. All people kind of have a certain rhythm to talking. This thing didn't have any sort of rhythm. I was in full-on terror mode. We kept yelling outside at it, "Who is it? Just stop fucking around!" And it kept saying,
"Stop fucking playing."
For almost 15 minutes. Then the smell goes away for a while. And for the next hour or so, you can hear someone basically creeping around the woods and snapping branches. Every couple of minutes it comes back to the door and says something. Finally, when the smell faded away, it was around 2 in the morning. Reese gets up and says, "Man, screw this," and walks outside with his rifle. He fired a shot into the air and said something to the effect of, "In the name of Jesus Christ, go away!" He fires 2 more times, and then from the woods, right up against the river across from the trailer, it sounds like something slowly gibbering and hooting. Then it starts screaming, and it almost sounds like a woman or a cat in a bag screaming. Like I seriously never heard anything like that. And we heard the brush over where it was start to shake. Reese fired into the tree line and then started backing into the house. We locked the door again, and we can hear this shit keening and screaming. Reese said something had come out of the bushes super low to the ground and crawling towards the cabin. He shot at it. Pretty much that's how the rest of the night went. It was literally screaming constantly for the next 2 hours, and we can hear it moving out into the tree line. But it never came back up to the cabin until everyone had finally fallen asleep. Tanner had been sitting in the chair watching the door with his rifle. No one else saw or heard this, and he told me 2 days later after it was all over. He said he was nodding off after the screaming and noise finally stopped. He'd almost been asleep when he saw someone come out of the bathroom and lay down in the middle of the floor and go to sleep. He had assumed it was one of us, and he nodded off. But then he said he realized something was wrong, and while pretending to be asleep, he had counted us. There were now 9 people in the cabin. He didn't want to try and shoot at the thing in the cabin and have it kill us all then and there, or have Reese wake up and start shooting and then we kill each other. So he just stayed awake all night, pretending to be asleep. He said sometimes it would stand up and do this weird jittery thing, or heave like it was laughing, but then it would lay back down. The story closes pretty weak because from my perspective nothing happened. We woke up and I noticed Tan was a little pale and that he was avoiding looking at us. We ate some breakfast, packed up, and started walking to his house. He stayed last in the cabin and said he'd lock up and bring me my uncle's keys just to start walking and he'd catch up, which I really didn't want to do. We got a little bit up the path, and when he came running up, we just jogged back to his house. His cousin took us home. There was a window in the bathroom. Tanner had gone back to lock up and looked in there. We were too stupid to lock a screenless window. The window was screwed up when he was looking in there. I guess it had been doing that all along, waiting for us to fall asleep or slip up, and then getting in among us. Walked with us all the way back to his house, and he said it lagged to the back of the group and looked him dead in the eyes before just walking into the woods.